here on France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're talking about how Spain is helping to concentrate the minds. Some saying it's time for an SOS for that country, even though, again, members of the government, they're sending mixed signals over whether or not they need bailout money now. Mark Dean of the Bloomberg News Agency is back with us. So is Christophe Bayard of the Paris-based Choiseul Institute, author of The New Economic Wars and a previous book on Spain, and Benjamin Coriat, who teaches economics at the University of Paris at Villetaneuse, member of the Appalled Economist. What is the Appalled Economist? Tell us.
Oh, it's very simple. We organized this group, let's say, but it's a large group now. With the Greek crisis and the solution provided to the Greek crisis.
How long ago was this?
No, because the point, we were convinced that, so to speak, the neoliberal wind could not continue so long. And after the explosion of the financial crisis in 2008-9, we said, oh, that's the end. We can now begin to reopen the serious dossier and do the serious things. And what we discovered is, on the contrary, it was an occasion to push more neoliberal politics to take the control of the budget states this time. So it was a step further in the same direction. So we decided, okay, now we have to speak. And this is the beginning of our group.
Okay, so the economists banding together against neoliberal policies. Now, for the second time in 2 weeks, there maybe is the leadership crisis in Europe brought home by the boss himself of the European Central Bank. He put pressure this Wednesday on Europe's political leadership to lead. Mario Draghi announcing the board refuses to lower interest rates. He's putting the ball in Brussels' court.
I don't view as the ECB's task to push governments into doing something. It's really their own decision whether they want to access the EFSF or not.
That statement, the ESFS, that's the firewall, effectively, the kitty for the fund for.
Yeah, that's the current fund that exists at the European level that Spain could tap if tonight it needed money. It could appeal to its partners and seek money there. The system is set up and running. The European Stability Mechanism, which is coming into force soon, isn't up and running yet. I mean, what Draghi was saying there, Pierre Moscovici said to journalists in Paris today as well. The money is there, but it's up to Spain to make the request. We must, Moscovici's word, we must respect Spanish sovereignty. We can't impose this on them.
But there was the sense that the words of Mario Draghi were also aimed at the rest of Europe's political leadership, that it wasn't his job to come up with the all-encompassing solution.
And without a doubt. I mean, this is something that we've heard from the ECB, again, right from the beginning, saying that, they can't do everything, that these are up to politicians and governments to decide. Well, that's true, it is a government responsibility, but in the end of the day, the ECB is the only sort of truly European institution that has power to act quickly, and they've proven again and again that when push comes to shove, that they'll be there. But you certainly have to. They're not there willingly, and they really want the governments to act first, if at all possible.
For people who don't follow economics closely, these statements that come out, what is it, every once a month, they have big press conferences. They can be a little boring. They're very cryptic at times. But
he's always cryptic.
But any central bank governor, I suppose. Yes. But Mario Draghi seems to have a more straightforward style, if I'm not mistaken, than his predecessor, especially in light of the crisis that's going on. Your thoughts on that?
Well, he's obliged to, really. But I agree with what he said. Now it's in the end of the governments, because, that's one thing to have the position of the central bank. But on the other side, the European governments have to decide quickly what they are going to do. Because it's not only a question of giving 50 or 100 billion euros to Spain or, I don't know, to Greece or to Portugal or to Ireland and other countries. But it's the story of what can we do on the long term for the European industry? Because if there is no export from France, from Germany, from Spain, from Italy, from Greece, from all the European countries towards the other parts of the world, there is no, I should say, local economy in Europe, and we'll get, some more debt, some more problems, some more unemployment in all the areas of Europe. So now the question is, right, we are going to pay for it. We are going to have the central bank to pay for Spain or Greece. But what are we going to do for the European industry, for European people unemployed? And that's the story. It's on the table now. And that's, in fact, the main problem.
At this point in time, the ECB then putting the ball in the court. But this is the interesting bit. You're saying in the hands of the political leaders of each nation, because really there's three different players in this, isn't there? Yeah. There's Frankfurt, where there's the European Central Bank. There's Brussels, where there's the European Commission. And there's the national governments. So whose job is this?
The point is, I agree with what you said. The only actor with the power to influence decisively the evolution of the crisis for the moment is the central bank. Bon. What I want to say is that the European Central Bank cannot pass the ball the way they are doing now to the so-called politicians, because they have a tremendous responsibility in the crisis. Remember, not the crisis, the way the crisis has spread and the problems we are facing. Remember the Greek moment. Greece needed something in the beginning like 50 billion euros, and the whole debt was 250 billions. Nothing, absolutely nothing, if you consider what the financial markets, what the central bank is capable to move in terms of flows. And the central bank had a very, very, let's say, dogmatic position, saying Greece has to pay. Remember Trichet. No default, in no way, in no...
but hang on, that gets back to the discussion we had in part one about what exactly is implied in a structural adjustment program.
Yeah.
If you give that money, there are conditions.
Yeah. No, the question of putting conditions for money is not a problem. It's quite normal. The question is which conditions, and are the conditions dying the ill person, killing the ill person, or are they adding him to recover? And the type of policy imposed to Greece, the condition imposed to Greece, has created the condition for having an endless crisis, coming from Greece to Ireland, to Portugal, now to Spain, and so on. So this is the reason why we cannot, the central bank cannot say, oh, it's the end of the politicians. They have played a role by imposing the false solution. And now, by not buying, even in the secondary market, the bonds, they create a situation of incredible tension. It's in the power of the central bank to buy secondary bonds, bonds in the secondary market. The Spain is crying for that, because this can open some space and some time, because we need time. We can design solutions if we have time.
Martine, do you agree?
I mean, I do. I mean, I think that you could add the fourth actor into that, which is the markets. And, in the end of the day, the bond investors, the financial markets don't care about the conditions or anything else. They want to know they're going to get their money back. And if it would have been said as the first bailout for Greece was 110 billion euros, which relative to the size of the European economy is nothing. And if at the time we would have just said, look, we're going to do whatever it takes. It's not going to be a problem. The markets would have been reassured. Greece would have been able to continue to finance itself in the markets.
The political discourse at the time was, oh, those feckless Greeks, they'll squander
the money. Well, that's still the political discourse today, isn't it?
They wanted to punish Greece. There is something like punishment in this plan, and it was completely wrong.
But that's the point, it comes back down to politics again and again and again.
Now, the European Commissioner in charge of internal markets and services, Michel Barnier, the Frenchman, this Wednesday, spelling out proposals for what could be the building blocks of a veritable banking union in Europe. It includes, as you can see there, imposing a levy on banks, requiring transfers between governments, and forcing write-downs on unsecured creditors. The catch in all of this, it wouldn't fully be implemented until 2018. Mark Dean mentioning the markets. Of course, they're not going to wait till 2018.
No, probably not. But it's not something new. I don't know if you remember, but when the euro was created, the treaty, that was 20 years ago. And when the euro was created, that was just based on the monetary policy, and there was nothing on the budgetary policy and nothing on taxes. A lot of countries were deeply against it, especially Britain. Britain was not going to be in the euro, but it had an influence on the treaty and what was done at the time of the creation of the euro 20 years ago. And unfortunately, you can't have a monetary policy without any budgetary policy, and that's the story we've got now. The fact that we are confronted with a situation where there is no common budgetary policy in Europe, and you've got huge differences between Germany and France.
So
and
those steps, are they a good first step?
What Michel Barnier is telling us, in fact, is something very simple, that we can't have any reform or any action from the central bank without having some sort of common budgetary policy. And that's a debate we had 20 years ago. It's not something new again. And there was a time when we were obliged, to agree on the reunification of Germany and to stabilize Central Europe. The German government at the time agreed on having a common currency. But a lot of countries, including Germany, didn't want, a budgetary policy because it was one step beyond something which was.
Or the French. Do you think the French will
Even
agree?
the French.
Even now,
No, you're right.
Do you see the French agreeing to let guys from Brussels come in and look over the books at the finance ministry?
No, probably not. That's the problem. No, certainly not. But we've got to be fair. Everyone in Europe has a responsibility in the situation. The government, the population in Spain, for example, because in fact people got huge debts for housing, cars, and everything. So in one way or another, they are partly responsible for what's happening in the country. We've got the responsibility of the central bank. We've got the huge responsibility of the commercial banks in Europe, which gave money to people who couldn't give the money back, in fact.
And in fact, it's in those terms that Michel Barnier couched it this Wednesday, sounding very much, Benjamin Coyat, let's listen to him, like a politician.
The banks should pay for the banks. We're going to break the link between banking crisis and public budgets. In other words, taxpayers' money.
There he is saying we don't want the taxpayers to have to pay. Mm-hmm. But of course, in reality, what's going to happen?
We don't know. Huh? We don't know what's going to happen. But the idea of trying to, destroy the links between banks and taxpayers is, to my view, a good orientation. Because one of the reasons why we are in the situation we are now is exactly, think to Ireland, for example, 65 billion euros of private debt, interbank debt, okay, transformed in public debt. From one day to another, Ireland, that used to be the famous pupil of
Celtic tiger.
Plunged and became the mouton noir of the
black sheep.
The black sheep of the whole story. So to do something on that direction is very important, and build a European banking system that is able to take charge of what is happening in the interbank exchanges, systems, and so on, is one important step.
And is something going to happen at the next summit?
It's on the agenda. It's on the agenda, and it seems that Barnier and others are looking in that direction. And what I have read until now is not something infeasible. Huh? I'm not completely pessimistic on that.
It's good to have these proposals from Barnier, but again, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it will depend on what the governments decide and whether they decide to get behind this and how quickly.
And most notably Germany.
And most notably Germany.
Not only.
Not
but
only
look,
Germany, of course.
Look,
Yeah.
Germany, even in the period of the Greek crisis, was not opposed to have interbank solutions, including the fact that the private sector had to pay its part of the crisis. It is Trichet and the others that had
said no at the time.
yeah.
And of course,
for this reason, I'm not
France
sure.
didn't agree.
I'm not sure that Sarkozy had
but certainly
different feelings.
What's concentrating the minds now, though, is the fact that it's more than ever a two-speed Europe. Investors more and more these past weeks even rushing to the safety of Northern Europe. Investors who've been taking their cash out of Spain and Greece. There you see nations where the bond yield is above 5%, 5.6% or more. And even though 10-year Spanish bonds this Wednesday dipping to 6.28%, German bonds will cost you 1.33% interest, nearly a 5-point spread. If that keeps up between now and the end of the month when that summit is scheduled, Mark Dean, does that mean we could have consensus?
How have consensus? Sorry, I didn't hear any consensus.
Consensus on a bold plan to reform the Eurozone?
Well, I mean, we'll have an agreement. There's always at least a formal agreement coming out of these summits, but the question is what's in it and how long it will last and how long it stays ahead of the game. I mean, that we'll just have to wait and see on the 28th and 29th of June.
And we'll have to leave it there for now. But I want to thank you for joining us, Mark Dean. I want to thank as well Benjamin Coriat and Christophe Paillard for being with us. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. And stay with us. Business is next. Will Edwards has all the latest.
The 2012 legislative elections live on France 24.